Welcome to Open Studio on Brattleboro Community Television. My name is Chris Lenois, and today we're talking about the Vermont economy, which has been in the midst of some troubling trends. The state's workforce has been stagnant in terms of growth, largely because there are fewer young people taking the place of those who age out. In his budget proposal to kick off the 2017 legislative session, Governor Phil Scott pointed to statistics that indicated a 6% reduction in Vermont's working age population in the last 4 years. Projections also show that we could lose another 10% by the year 2040. But that doesn't have to be the case, according to my guest today. Carolyn Weir, advisor to the J. Warren and Lois McClure Foundation, and Alex Beck, Workforce and Education Program Coordinator for Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, are just two of many smart people trying to put young Vermonters into good-paying jobs that are available now or will be in the very near future. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Chris. You're very kind.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Alex, let me start with you to try and get some perspective on some of those statewide trends and how they play out here locally with regards to our aging population, our shrinking workforce.
Sure, yeah. You know, what the BDCC is really most thrilled about all of what we're talking about now is a handful of years ago we did a hiring inventory of our own locally, and it was much more of a testing of assumptions and much more of a gut check. And what we recognized was over the next 5 years, there's going to be about a 3,000 person workforce gap in our three major employment sectors, which is healthcare, manufacturing, and hospitality and tourism. So we've known for quite some time that there was going to be a gap, and the gap is starting now and will get worse as people continue to age out. And so when we see similar data sets come out statewide, we really know we're on the right path, and that what was really a very initial survey, we know that what we've started is at least marching in the right direction.
Nice, nice. Now, the McClure Foundation has developed this brochure, The Pathways to Promising Careers. There's also an online resource, mcclurevt.org/pathways. And Carolyn, this is updated every couple of years. Let's talk a little bit about the methodology that goes into it.
Absolutely. So this is really a partnership between the J. Warren and Lois McClure Foundation and the Vermont Department of Labor. Every 2 years, the Vermont Department of Labor produces its long-term occupational projections data set, which comes from the Federal Department of Labor. And they spend some time in shop making sure that that data set is the best possible representation of job projections for Vermont, knowing that there are any number of limitations, right? The data set is not clairvoyant. We can't predict for jobs that don't exist yet. But given those limitations, they put out an exhaustive list, over 600 jobs for the state. And what the McClure Foundation did, Chris, you mentioned it earlier, a lot of what we hear about workforce development and workforce skills gap in Vermont is rather grim. And we know that there's some really hopeful data included in this occupational projections data set. So let's do a pretty straightforward data crunch of those jobs that are projected to pay well, over $20 an hour, and are projected to have at least 100 job openings over the next 10 years, and see what shakes out. The jobs on this list represent a very wide range of skill sets and experiences and sectors. They range from carpenters to physical therapists to insurance sales agents to physicians. And they represent some of the sectors that you might expect to see, some of the sectors that Alex has already mentioned, healthcare, construction, advanced manufacturing, and business-to-business services.
So yeah, we're talking about taking hundreds of jobs, you said 600, and whittling it down to 54 of the most promising, and it sounds like a blend of different criteria for that in terms of availability, the pay scale. Are there thresholds? I mean, I got to think that probably there's one that was like 55 or 56 that didn't make the cut.
Well, they're actually using those two filters around pay and around demand. Pay $20 an hour and demand 100 jobs projected over the next 10 years. That includes both jobs due to growth, but also jobs due to attrition. A lot of the sectors that we've talked about in these short 5 minutes are sectors where the average worker is above the average workplace age. And so advanced manufacturing, construction, healthcare in particular, employers in those sectors are not necessarily experiencing growth, but they're saying we need to find younger skilled workers to replace our current workers who are looking at retirement in the near future. And so using those filters, about 104 jobs shook out, and we picked a cross-representation of 54, essentially 54 that could easily fit in a brochure and that represented that very wide range of skill sets, sectors, backgrounds, educational requirements that we're talking about. But the full list of jobs and the Vermont-based education and training pathways to those jobs we've put online. So there's an online component to this resource that really gets into depth in helping students and working adults identify and articulate what type of education or training pathways might land them.
And you've done this a few different times now, at least 2 other times you've put out this brochure, right?
This is the second time we've put out the brochure, okay. But what's
Because remember we spoke in 2015 about so that was the first one.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what's less known is that the McClure Foundation had internally been doing this data crunching for closer to 6 years to help inform our own grant making around the state. We envision a Vermont in which no promising job goes unfilled for lack of a qualified applicant. And it's hard to do thoughtful, impactful grant making around post-secondary attainment or workforce development without understanding what jobs are in demand, right? So this was part of the data analysis that we did internally to help inform our own work, and it was really about 3 or 4 years ago the board said, you know, this data, it is really hopeful. It's quite inspiring. We find it helpful in our own work. I imagine that Vermont students and job seekers and employers would find it useful too, and that's when we approached the Department of Labor and said, you know, we have some funds and some capacity to help put together a small-scale marketing and awareness campaign.
Yeah. Well, and over the course of 6 years, I imagine you start to see some sectors consistently needing workforce or consistently growing. Can we highlight a couple of those?
Absolutely. So the 4 that are most represented in this brochure are 4 that are seeing similar demand in southern Vermont and in Windham County specifically. Healthcare. We're seeing the demographic pressures in Vermont around an aging workforce represented here in 2 ways. One, I already mentioned, it's an older workforce in the healthcare field, so they're looking for young, skilled workers to come into any number of jobs in the healthcare space. There are 54 jobs here, and we have taken a step back and recategorized them this time around. 2 years ago, we categorized them by the minimum educational requirements that they needed. And this time around, we said, you know, in Vermont, so many students are now thinking about and talking about their learning in different ways. It's more student-centered, it's more personalized, it's more flexible. And so what are the types of academic career education theories that we could use to structure these 54 jobs? So we used Holland's career codes, and the jobs are structured in 4 categories. They start with jobs that involve working with your hands or with machines to make, fix, and build things. They include carpenters, CNC machine operators, electricians, engineers. So a number of jobs in advanced manufacturing and in construction, both of which are seeing increasing demand across the state. And then the second category, are you organized and detail-oriented? Do you like to work with lots of information? That's everything from patrol officers to paralegals to market research analysts and cost estimators to loan officers and lawyers, a lot of business-to-business services that also reflect a number of Vermont's smaller employers and entrepreneurs. The third category, do you like to observe, learn, analyze, and solve problems? And this is particularly for folks who think diagnostically and think in a creative and problem-solving approach. And so a lot of the healthcare fields are housed in this list, everything from nurses to massage therapists to dental hygienists to nurse practitioners. And the fourth list, do you like to work with people and use your creativity to guide and persuade? And that includes quite a wide range of folks who teach, either in a formal or informal capacity. It includes writers and authors, financial services, sales agents. And what we tend to say when we take this list and these categories to students and job seekers across the state is not to look at these as four rigid categories with static job descriptions, but as baskets of skills that include skills that are absolutely transferable between these categories. So we're hearing stories of students as young as 4th grade using this list to prompt conversations and imaginations about what life might look like for them in middle school, high school, and after high school. Certainly we're hearing middle school and high school students using this list to inform the choices that they make around course selection and around whether their local career and technical education center is the right pathway for them. And also working with state partners who work with college-age students, working adults, and those who are seeking post-secondary education and training that don't look like 2- and 4-year degrees, registered apprenticeships, credentials of value, certificates, on-the-job training.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of things you just said echo a conversation you and I had in this very studio one time, Alex. I feel like I'm hearing that echo about some of the things that you've been doing with Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. So talk a little about how the work you do dovetails with some of this information you get from McClure.
Absolutely, and I think the depth of the data that this provides us, especially with regards to the wage and the real opportunities in the future, is a level of data that we didn't collect. We kind of knew that, there would be growth in these industries, and that's where our high school program, the Fast Track to Success, which I've discussed before, so we knew where to bring these students. What this provides us is a list of competencies, potential credentials that they can pursue, and the actual name of the occupation that they can start chewing on in their heads to say, if I pursue this credential to become a nurse practitioner or a medical assistant, I know it'll pay off because I have some data that says I could expect to make about this much a year, and it would take this many years for me to get that degree or that certificate. And so it takes something that is, with career awareness, it's much more broader. I joke, butcher, baker, candlestick maker. But with this data, we can really see the name of the occupation. And what we enjoy the opportunity is that in working so closely with the private sector, we know which of these jobs that are high wage that Brattleboro Memorial is looking to hire for right now. Yeah. And so what we can do is we can help connect the resources that exist to these jobs articulated here, and then help funnel the students into those opportunities. So we're not building very many new things. It's that with this data, we can look and we can kind of steer the conversations and steer the students and help them develop their own path that they can confidently walk down knowing it'll pay off one day.
I know this is relatively new data and the brochure has just been out for a short time here, but I'm wondering if you've had a chance to show some of this to employers, because I imagine seeing some things happening here in Windham County, knowing it's not just a Windham County specific issue, but a statewide issue, it probably makes them feel maybe not relieved certainly that there's this challenge, but certainly feeling that the challenge is being addressed on a bigger level than Windham County.
Absolutely, and I think that's, it's of great pride to both myself and I think the BDCC that we aren't following this trend of workforce development that I think now that everyone's talking about it, everyone's talking about it. It was really through the leadership of our current executive director, Adam Grunald, who recognized the phrase workforce development is economic development. And there are a number of conferences and courses that you can go to that just talk about that one key phrase. And for us, we really identified workforce development as an economic development priority. And so since then, we've been trying to gather all the resources, and data is just such an important one of them. We love our Fast Tracks program, but the data that this provides us strengthens it and really gives it much more direction and confidence.
Yeah. And Carolyn, I don't know if we've talked about these three sectors of healthcare, advanced manufacturing, hospitality, and I think a lot of people can think about very specific examples of employers here in Windham County or across Vermont. But there are certainly other industries here in Vermont, and wondering as McClure sifts through this data, gets it, if you're kind of surprised, some other ones like a technology or renewable energy, jobs in those fields weren't more plentiful or readily available, or how things like that fit into this?
Well, green energy is actually a really interesting topic to bring up because not many jobs will include the term green energy or renewable in the job description, but many jobs in construction, advanced manufacturing include jobs in the green energy space. And so one of the grant partners that the McClure Foundation has had in the past several years is the Vermont Education Energy Partnership. And they are developing a curriculum all around green energy careers that they can take to high school classrooms, to career and technical education classrooms to help folks learn about where in Vermont they can find successful, stable employment that allow them to support their families and support the green energy environment that they care about. I would say one of the things that is not a surprise to us, having seen how this data shakes out, is the fact that the very large majority of the jobs on this list that are both high pay and high demand require some form of post-secondary education or training. Those don't all look like 2- and 4-year degrees, although many of them do require an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. And we know that only 60% of Vermont's high school graduates are continuing on to college, relatively low for New England. And that only 37% of Vermont's low-income high school graduates are continuing on to college within 16 months of graduation. And that statistic is especially troubling. And so we are hoping that this data, as simple as it may be, can be used to prompt conversations, help students who are college capable but don't see themselves as college going, imagine possibilities that involve stackable credentials, affordable degree programs, and affordable education pathways.
Is that something that McClure directly administers, or is that you do through partnerships with places like BDCC? Through
partnerships. So I would say the toolkit of a private funder includes grants. It includes programs like the awareness program we're talking about today. It includes the ability to convene, and it includes, in some cases, impact investments, where a mission-related investment is made out of the endowment before those dollars are deployed as grants. Today we're talking primarily about the McClure Foundation's grant making and the partners that it's made in the nonprofit sector, municipalities, state agencies around Vermont, and the partnership that it's developed with the Department of Labor to identify this data, use it to inform its own grant making, and to inform the work of our grantee partners.
Yeah, you anticipated the next question, which was, where does the state come into this? Because we started talking about Phil Scott, our governor, and some of the things that he's pledged to do as far as investment in workforce training, workforce development. So they are a partner in this.
So I'd say the state is a partner primarily in the Department of Labor. So the Vermont Department of Labor has a number of career resource centers across the state where trained employees have this brochure as well as many other resources and can help working adults boost their resume, consider their career path, apply for a job, talk about next steps. So I'd say they are a huge partner. As far as Governor Scott and his administration goes, I think we're very encouraged to hear that workforce development and post-secondary attainment is a state priority, as is early care and education. I think we also recognize that philanthropists in the nonprofit sector will always have a role to play in partnering with local, state, and federal government to ensure that low-income Vermont families, students whose parents didn't go to college, and other vulnerable populations in Vermont have clearly articulated pathways to these jobs and then support systems along the way to reach them.
I mean, when you think about that dynamic between state, nonprofits, and an organization like yours, do you see a lot of synergy there? Is it another arrow in the quiver? Or?
I think more and more the collaboration between state entities and the public sector and the private sector and the nonprofit sector, the closer we've all gotten to each other, the more successful we've all been. So the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation is the regional development corporation for Windham County, and that is a really close relationship we have with the ACCD, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. But we're also, a lot of our workforce programs are funded through the Department of Labor, through grants through them. And so the closer we're able to align these goals, which they're becoming closer and closer by the missions of these institutions and agencies, the more successful we've been. So if you view the Department of Labor in terms of training and placement of people in search of work, and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development representing employers looking to hire good people, the best case scenario for both of those is a fantastic hire, is an employer who is really, really happy with the person they just hired. Because that means the employee has all the education, all of the social competencies, all the community and social support they need to show up to work every day and excel. And the fact that they can do that, an employer is happy.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of different, stories that are saying, oh, it's very hard to find a job. People probably are already in high school thinking, well, I have to leave the state. So kind of an opportunity to dissuade them of that information. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, that's okay. Those are the exact myths that we're trying to dispel
Right.
today. And I think to Alex's point, Chris, it's an incredible time to be a high school student in Vermont if you are looking to try on any number of career opportunities or interests before you graduate from high school. The Flexible Pathways Bill, Act 77, that was passed in 2013, allows for a whole host of opportunities in between 7th and 12th grade to take 2 college courses for free while you're a student, to connect with your school's credentialed work-based learning coordinator, to consider job shadowing programs, internship programs, part-time jobs that would allow a student to develop some transferable skills around what it means to be in the workplace, to be an employee, to work in a collaborative team setting with colleagues. The Sophomore Summit that's planned for Southern Vermont coming up this spring is another great example of opportunities that high school students in particular have to connect with area employers and learn from them about what jobs are available in their hometowns or in their home areas, and allow them relatively or objectively affordable education and training pathways to them.
And this Sophomore Summit is something both organizations are working on jointly, or?
Yeah, so it's an event, the phrase Sophomore Summit, events similar to it named that have been done in a number of different counties. The one in Rutland looks a little bit different than the one in Bennington, and ours will probably look a little different than theirs, but it's towards the end of April, and all sophomores throughout Windham County will be attending. And what we're doing is we've divided, we've picked about 20 different career paths in a similar way to the way they've sorted that data, and inviting people in those careers and occupations to come and host a panel. And so all of these students will descend upon downtown Brattleboro. I think we're kicking it off at the Latches Theater, giving the overview, and then students will break out, and based on what they think they might be interested in, they'll get to sit and learn and maybe do a little bit of hands-on experience with 2 or 3 of each of these career paths that they've picked. And what's really excellent is that we have partners. Youth Services is a major convener and organizer of this event with us, as well as the Southern Vermont Area Health Education Center, AHEC. And so when there are those students who light up in one of those panels, we're not just going to send them home and think about it. There's going to be people there who, are you interested in MedQuest, which is a summer program for students looking to get into the healthcare industry. So it's really having all the right people in the room. Creative Workforce Solutions will be there, as well as a number of representatives from the school systems are helping design it as well. So it's going to be a really, I think, exciting opportunity to get the students in front of real life people doing these jobs in Windham County, and share about what it's like.
And is that 20 jobs you identified, I think you said, is that across the spectrum of healthcare, advanced manufacturing, tourism?
And it's everything, because
because the strategy of this, right? I mean, there's a couple different ways. Do you lift up the weakest part of that, or do you focus on the strongest in terms of need or in terms of skill set? There's a few different ways you can go.
Well, yeah, and I think by skill set is a great way to look at it, because we can start with all the shared skills. So no matter what industry you want to go into, there's going to be a certain amount of shared skills you need. And that's where we talk about interpersonal skills, communication skills, showing up on time, being dressed appropriately, answering the phone and sending emails appropriately. almost every job could use those skills. And then as students get closer and closer to what they think they might want to do, it might get more specialized. But whether you want to go into manufacturing or healthcare, you're probably going to want to take math your senior year of high school. And so we get more and more specific as we age and as we hone our educational careers, but especially working with sophomores, we're really looking at making sure they have a foundation that they can pursue a number of these jobs. And so when we're looking at these careers, when they say, do you like working with your hands? And then you see there's such a wide variety of occupations that require that skill. And so again, we're not pushing anyone down a certain pathway. It's really what gets you going, and then from there, let's start layering the skills, layering the competencies, and then after they get their GED, or maybe even before they graduate high school, start laying those credentials on. And maybe a 16-week course to get your medical assistant license at CCV, maybe that's the reason they enroll to become a full-time nurse. And so it doesn't need to happen all at once. We can stack and build these skills as they age, as students pursue their careers. And one thing to just remind us all is that adult education is a huge portion of this as well, is people who are long out of high school, making sure they have the resources to re-enter the workforce or to upskill, make a change from a completely different industry. And so that's where we see the retail skills, running your own retail shop has a lot of the same skills you might need to be an accountant in a large firm. A lot of those management, time management, numbers, all of those skills, there's a lot more common skills than you would think. So we're not too concerned about which way the students are walking quite yet.
Right. Let's finish, Carolyn, by talking a little bit about the momentum that the McClure Foundation has built for this over 6 years, and what you do with that. Obviously, you've got to wait for the next data set to come out from the state, but certainly you're not waiting for that to start already thinking about how you evaluate what you've learned and refine that for the next pathways to promising careers.
No, that's a great question, Chris. Since 2008, which is when the McClure Foundation Board really identified access to college and career education as its sole issue area of focus, they've awarded over $3 million to support work in Vermont to help articulate these education and training pathways to these jobs for low-income Vermonters, for students whose parents didn't go to college, for working adults, for veterans, for foster youth, for any number of populations. And we've learned a lot along the way. I think it's incredibly exciting to see the degree of momentum and energy in the state right now around career education, around post-secondary attainment. Again, that might look like a 2- and 4-year degree, might look like a 16-week credential of value, might look like a registered apprenticeship or an on-the-job training program. But we know at the end of the day that labor markets across the U.S. are tightening. In Vermont, that demographic shift is only happening faster and it's more apparent. And what that means in this context is actually really good. It means that there are high-paying, high-demand jobs in Vermont for those who can plan ahead and can use some of this information to inform any investment that they make in their post-secondary education and training. So the McClure Foundation remains committed to the issue, remains committed to finding specific areas of leverage where private funding can help move the needle on this issue, remains committed to being at the statewide table as folks try to crack the nut on how to support Vermont's most vulnerable residents as they think about their own education and training pathways, and to supporting regional partners like the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation.
Yeah, and the website, mcclurevt.org/pathways. And where here in the community can people get this brochure, Alex?
We've got stacks and stacks in our office. We also are sure that the Career Center has plenty of these. So if it's for you, you can swing by our office. If it's for one of your children, send them to the Career Center, and they'll be able to find that pretty easily.
Yeah. Alex, Beck, Carolyn Weir, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And thank you for watching this edition of Open Studio on Brattleboro Community Television. I want to encourage you to go to the website, brattleboro.tv.org, to watch this and other editions of Open Studio on demand. Thank you.